Obviously, it's been a dream forever to experience that moment, and that's often why you might build a side hustle or build a business in general. Um, I can say it's not super life changing. Maybe if I had a few extra zeros on the end, it would be, but maybe not as well. I think, my role as a dad and a partner and a friend and all of that kind of continues on, and I like to build things, so likely not going to change much. But yeah, you keep refreshing that screen a few times to make sure it's real and it's not going away, and then quickly get back to business. And in my case, selling my business meant transitioning it over to new owners. So there was still kind of a lot to be done, even in that exhilarating moment of feeling like a millionaire, I guess.
Right. You see it hit, but the work isn't quite done yet. And it's almost anticlimactic in a way because it's not a surprise. You've been building toward it probably for months in terms of due diligence and negotiations and everything else. But was there a treat yourself moment, or do you go out and buy anything?
It's funny. I deferred a lot of purchases, kind of clenching and making sure that it was going to be actually sold. So yeah, there was a few Amazon purchases here and there, things for my family that I kept saying, maybe we should hold off until the money hits. But I like to play golf, so I plan to, treat myself to a lesson and try and get better. And get my wife involved as well. Maybe we can take lessons together.
Okay.
And yeah, we went out to a nice dinner, a closing dinner, so to speak,
Yeah.
which is really great too. But yeah, business as usual shortly thereafter. I don't want to make it sound unexciting, but still, work to be done. I can't hang up the jersey quite yet.
Well, very good. There's always more work to be done. It's always the question of, well, what next? What now? That's sometimes the harder question to answer, but I think it's a really cool and exciting story because Little Side Hustle Project started 2018, which I would have said was late to the, quote unquote blogging game, but still found a way to make it work and make it work quite well. The saving grace, or maybe one of the saving graces, was kind of like when we earlier spoke. It was very much an SEO play. We're going to write these really in-depth, long tail articles, trying to make the best thing on the internet for this specific query, and really help that buyer make their decision on this product versus this product, or is this thing legit? Is this going to be worthwhile? And then saying, well, we could still play that game, but while we're doing that, why don't we see if we can buy traffic profitably? And it's kind of where we want to go in this conversation is this idea of ads arbitrage and diversifying away from strictly SEO. And it's interesting because this was my, 20 years ago, this was like my first side hustle, very much reliant on paid traffic, driving clicks to these, shoe comparison, like where can I find the best price on my next pair of shoes type of pages. And at that time, it was the search landscape, or the paid traffic landscape, was a little bit different than it is today, but kind of the same model. Everything old is new again. Are you able to speak to when that started and how you're able to ramp it up?
Yeah, I had forgotten that was your first side hustle, or that you have some experience in that. It's amazing. Yeah, so a couple years into the business, we were doing well from an SEO perspective and generating a lot of organic traffic. But it always felt to me like a flamingo standing on one leg. And just from a risk perspective, right? Like maybe a big gust, a big SEO update will come and blow us over. Maybe some competition will come in. And that's always the case, right? Like your very best keywords, you often can only rank for so long, and then a bigger publisher comes in and decides to take your cake. And so, yeah, I always just felt like diversity was the name of the game. I needed to figure out a new way to diversify the traffic, the earnings. And so in thinking about that, there's many different avenues to do so. So a lot of people try and own their audience through an email list or through a social media following, and then be able to. And I think that's a really sound, smart strategy. In fact, it's probably the way to go in today's SEO world, being as choppy as it is. It's probably the only game in town. I know you do that quite well, Nick. You have a large following and keep them engaged. So I think that's a really strong route.
Well, the social
The
media
other,
game is a little weak, but the email game is okay.
always room for improvement.
And for a time, there was an email component, but it was, if I remember correctly, it was kind of hard to get people searching for some, super specific, brand name query to join an email list about, oh, I don't remember what it was, like the top 10 direct to consumer health brands or something. It was a little bit of a stretch.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it was hard for us to find something that would be interesting enough for people to follow on because it was too broad. Our niche wasn't niched down enough.
Yeah.
So, that's also some advice for where to start, I think, for folks listening who are interested in, how big is my niche too big? Is it too small? In some ways, a good way to answer that question would be, would somebody sign up for an email list for this? And if so, what would I talk about? Because if you're able to kind of niche it down to something that people are interested in week over week, month over month, then that might be worth building an audience for. But in the case of Fin versus Fin, it's challenging. We were health and wellness focused. That's very broad. And what I found to be the case is that most people are interested in a very specific health condition or solving a health problem. So hair loss or skincare. Those are really
Hmm.
broad, but they're starting to get niched down enough to build an audience that you can engage over time. But staying really broad, health and wellness, it was tough for us to build an audience, or an owned audience on social media or email list that would be engaged, and hard to know what topics to continuously serve that crowd, given how broad it was. So the other way that I thought I could diversify the traffic, and also given my experience, I've worked as a growth marketer in a few startups, and therefore had a good amount of paid ad experience.
Okay.
So I thought, hey, why don't I try to run some paid ads and see, if maybe I can make the math work out such that I buy the ads at a certain cost, I drive the traffic to a landing page, and I'm able to create affiliate revenue that is higher than the cost of the ads. So kind of an arbitrage play there, and it actually seemed easier in some ways. I know it sounds complicated for most people to think about that, and sounds risky and like you have to watch numbers all the time. But it actually sounded easier for me than figuring out how I'm going to get a million followers on social media or a newsletter.
Yeah, I mean, it was easier for me starting out too. It's just like, well, I don't know anything about SEO, but I could kind of buy my way to the top of the search results. It's a shortcut in a way if you can make the numbers work.
Exactly. And so really where to start is another reason I should say it feels very de-risked is you already know what keywords are working from an organic perspective. And so from a Google Ads perspective or a search ads perspective, you can quite literally target those exact same keywords from a paid perspective, and you have all the math worked out in terms of what is the conversion rate on that page and what is the commission rate resulting from that conversion. And so you can back into the cost of ads quite easily before you even spend a single dollar, and you can have quite a bit of confidence that maybe this is worth putting a dollar in to get $1.50 out or something like that. So it seemed like an obvious play for me at the time because I had a nice set of partners and a nice set of keywords that we were already ranking for organically. And
Okay.
so really trying to double down, I think was the impetus was how do I get more from these keywords I already know that we're ranking for and are quite lucrative. How do I de-risk my business at the same time as double down on what's working?
Yeah, even if you are ranking organically, it's a chance to, double dip and, take up more screen real estate on that first page, even if you do have to pay for some of those clicks.
Exactly. And the other thing, I guess the other motivation was I just saw other people doing this. When you Google
If they're
something,
making it work, why can't I?
exactly. And in fact, it became clear to me over time that these big publishers that I was competing against, the Forbes, the Health Lines in my case, but even big newspapers, whether it's New York Times, LA Times, Chicago Tribune, like it doesn't matter. All USA Today, all of these guys have a big paid media arbitrage strategy, which means that they're buying keywords essentially and driving traffic to a landing page and then making money as an affiliate. And I
Interesting.
know,
And it's
yeah,
primarily affiliate. It's not necessarily like a display ads play. Or did you ever have display ads on Fin versus Fin?
I did actually, but I think it's quite hard, just given the economics of the display ads, how little they pay these days.
Right.
So you generally have to have like a higher ticket conversion moment, but you can also include display ads on that page to help subsidize the cost. So it's not like you have to just have one monetization method, but I do think that there has to be an affiliate play generally.
Okay, so there was some precedence for doing this. Big publishers were doing this. You had some background in doing it at the day job and say, okay, I think we can make this work. And we kind of have a sense of what a page view is going to be worth on average. So if we can buy traffic for less than that, then it should work out. And specifically with Google, I mean, I always thought this is like the greatest business model in the world. Like you can bid on the exact, keywords, like what your customer is typing in and, get in front of them as long as you're willing to pay for that. What were you using like before setting up any of the ad stuff? Like what were you using to track the like conversion, like the page view value from an affiliate standpoint on the landing pages or on the site itself?
Yeah, so at some point our site scaled to hundreds of partners, and they're all across all different affiliate platforms. So Impact, ShareASale, Partnerize, Everflow, you name it, like
Yeah.
hundreds, on down the long tail. And so basically, one of the challenges was if you're just working with one partner or just a handful of partners and they're all on the same platform, it's quite easy. You can just log into the platform itself and see, how many commissions did you drive from that partner in a certain time range or on a certain page, etc. But if you're promoting a bunch of different partners and they're all on different platforms, then you do need a tool to aggregate all of those earnings and all of that data into one centralized place that you can look at every day without going crazy. At least I felt like I needed that. So
Yeah.
in my case, I invested in a tool called Trackonomics. I guess I used a series of tools before that, but they all, basically we outgrew them at some point. So
I was using one, or I actually still am, what you called Affluent. I think affluent.io, which I think Impact bought that one too, where it's like we're going to pull in the data from a bunch of different affiliate networks. I think Lasso will probably have the same functionality or similar functionality too, where you can, pull data in from a bunch of different sources, so you're not trying to, track that across 20 different logins.
yeah, Affluent was the one that I used as well.
Okay.
And then, they cut me off at some point. It's no longer free. So, but Lasso, at
I
least for
I have not reached that tier yet, so a little play it at a little smaller level.
it's a good problem to have, I suppose. But they do have direct access to how much money you're making, so they know you can afford it. But Lasso is a good one as well. I've used that as well in the past and tinkered with it. So, but
Okay.
basically, the key here is that you do need a source of truth for that's reliable, and that's pulling in from multiple affiliate platforms into one place. And with that data, that's actually really critical. We can talk about it at some point in the conversation for bid optimization and passing the conversion data back into Google or whatever advertising platform you're using to
Yeah.
to help optimize the spend. So it's critical to have all this data in one place, not only for your own sanity to understand to track things and understand if you're making money from your ads,
Now, do
but
you like, I
also
want to pause there. Like, do you like giving Google that data? That has always made me nervous to say, okay, a conversion is worth $5 and you just sent me this, traffic for 3. And so if I'm Google, I'm saying, hey, well, you got $2 in margin there. So like naturally I want to increase your cost. Like you're, kind of the Bezos line of your margin is my opportunity. And I don't know. It's always made me nervous to give them that level of intel on how profitable or not the campaign was.
if you aren't a very sophisticated ad buyer, Google very likely will, like with certain settings in your campaign, Google will eat your margin away. But you can also set up kind of restrictions or parameters within your campaign to target a certain return on investment, as an
Okay.
example.
Okay.
And Google knows that if you're not achieving your marketing goals, you will pause spend altogether. So I think the incentive for them to keep the money flowing is larger than for them to eat your margin. Although if you don't watch your ad spend and you kind of leave it up to Google just to spend freely, then very likely they will eat away your margin.
They're happy to do that for you. That's like they see the MO seems to be to have all these like entry level employees on a quarterly rotating basis be your ads account rep, and they always call you up and they're very eager about selling you on the next thing, and the answer is always, well, have you tried Performance Max, or have you tried increasing your budget? It's like I don't think you understand. Like there's some, like you said, there's these ROI parameters we're trying to operate in.
Yeah, yeah. I constantly joke with the new rep who gets inevitably gets assigned to you after 2 months of the previous
Right.
one
It's like,
working with you,
yeah,
with no context and no handoff whatsoever. And I at this point I just tell them I'm really not interested in working with you. I have really negative associations. I haven't had a great experience with most of my Google reps. You're probably an exception. You're probably great and can provide a lot of insight. But I just want to be clear that I'm not going to try a performance max campaign. I've already run that experiment. And so, unless there's really things that you can move the needle on in the short term and that you can send me over email, I'm not interested in spending the time. Yeah, I totally, I
yeah,
know
and
it
then
sounds really
they never.
jaded, but
We got some suggestions for you. We got some recommendations for your account. Cool. Send them over email. No, we can't do that. Like, that's like big red flag for me.
totally, totally. And at the end of the day, you understand their incentives. They're a hired sales rep. They're not a consultant that's just there to help you. They are looking to increase your spend. So almost all the recommendations are going to lead to that outcome.
Okay. So would an example landing page be um, brand X versus brand Y, like that type of comparison post, the stuff that was ranking organically, or is it more, this specific product review? Like where did you see the best results in sending traffic to paid wise?
Yeah, so kind of going in line with this idea of seeing this out in the world and seeing and kind of basically copying what's working. I would Google things in my niche, this brand versus that brand, or the best XYZ for ZYX, or this review. I'd Google all of these things and I would see paid results. And they almost always, in almost every single case, the paid results landing page was a top 5 or top 10 landing page. So just a
Okay.
list of links and with a few bullet points on each, maybe a rating or a review, maybe a link to a review in some cases. But for the most part, it was really just, here's the number one option for that query at the very top of the page, and then there's 4 others. And very likely that top option is the one that's paying the brand or the affiliate the most.
Okay.
But in all cases, or in most cases, the brand or the publisher, whoever's running these ads and creating the landing page, is likely partnered with all 4 or 5 of them. So they don't really care
Sure.
which one of them you click on. But that's the general setup of the page, and you can sort of see from the economic incentives of the publisher or the advertiser, the affiliate in this case, they want to give you a lot of options, but make it easy for you to choose one of them. That's how the math is going to work out for them to outlay the ad spend in the beginning.
Okay. And did you end up creating separate pages, paid landing pages versus organics? Like maybe I don't need 3,000 words of copy if I really just want somebody to click this thing from an ad landing page.
Yeah, exactly. Thinking about it more as a landing page rather than content is key.
Okay.
So really, really separate work streams and de-indexed rather than sort of in the Google index and getting muddied or not muddied, but basically and not having a clear transparency on where the traffic is coming from and where the conversions are coming from. So really creating a separate page just for paid that has as few exit ramps as possible, except for to the affiliate partners. So likely trimming down the navigational bar at the top, likely minimizing the footer in the bottom, definitely minimizing the content on the page other than just what is needed to get somebody to understand their options, choose the one that's best for them, and then go on to that partner and do a little bit more research on their own.
Okay. Did you ever get in trouble? Like my ad account early on, for the shoe business, would occasionally get slapped for being like a bridge page account. They say, the sole purpose of your landing page is to drive traffic to another page, another site. And it's like, well, yeah, that's how I get paid. But I don't know, they wanted something else, and we, would have to rework the landing pages every now and again, like try and add more content. And it was all going to be template driven or, what you might call programmatic, because it's like, well, there's, 100,000 pairs of shoes or 300,000 pairs of shoes. Like we're not going to write an individual article for all this stuff. So we're going to have to pull that, copy from the feeds, from the product catalogs provided by the retailers in a lot of cases. But is that still a thing? Or they are less strict about that now?
Maybe I just didn't start it early enough, but I haven't ever gotten that block from Google.
All
Yeah, in
right.
general, they've been pretty happy to take the ad spend and even help you increase it right through the through the account reps.
Sure.
Um, I do. It's sometimes been hard to describe to the account reps exactly what the flow is, and the fact that a conversion doesn't happen on my site, it happens on a third party site, and so it's hard sometimes for the Google rep or for internal teams at Google to understand this flow,
Yeah.
but in general, it's
Which is
become so common
surprising
that
if they've got, Forbes and New York Times, they've got other big publishers doing the same thing.
it's become so common now that I think yeah, it's no longer on their list of don't do this, not allowed kind of advertising. There are some restrictions, and I can get into that, specifically on brand names. In my niche on drug names, so you're not allowed to bid on drug names, things like Viagra or finasteride for hair loss. You can't you cannot bid on those names on those keywords unless you're a pharmacy. So you need a specific kind of certification. It's called Legit Script, which costs tens of thousands of dollars a year. And
Okay.
so, you have to be a real pharmacy. Like you can't just be a normal person paying this money and then, going to town and bidding on drug names. So
But you
there
could
are some
go,
restrictions.
like in that case, you could go a little bit broader. You could say, the best, hair loss products or the best things to prevent hair loss, something like that.
Exactly. Yeah. As long as you're being broad enough, things like um, or even like erectile dysfunction, like even just the condition itself. But as long as you're not specifically talking about the brand in some cases, or the drug name, the actual kind of technical drug name.
Yeah.
But I think there are other restrictions, just to be clear. It depends on your niche. I think that there are likely other restrictions. I know you can't bid on things like CBD. There's restrictions there.
Okay.
And there's also federal restrictions against real estate and how discrimination in real estate and housing. So there's protected categories, so to speak, and every niche is a little bit different, but um, the restriction around brand names is both on the Google side in some cases, as well as the affiliate partners themselves. So the brands themselves may not be super happy for you to be bidding on their brand name and therefore driving up the cost of ads, their own cost of ads, right? Because it's an auction system. So if I bid up a lot on a brand's brand name, they are likely paying a higher cost for on their own brand name as well. And so brands can be quite particular about that, and it will require some persuading, essentially, to convince them that that's an incremental. Um, the conversions you're driving them are incremental, and that it's still worthwhile to allow you, the third party affiliate, to bid on their brand name.
Oh, okay, because that's something I see very, very commonly. Here's our affiliate terms and conditions. No paid traffic bidding on, anything related to, our brand name. It's like we don't want you to, jump in front of that traffic that they, in theory, were going to get anyways if somebody was looking for that stuff. And so it's kind of this, you open the negotiation to say, I do this. I do this well. It's going to be incremental. I mean, you show them some. Well, how do you convince somebody to say, okay, we'll make an exception for Finn versus Finn?
Yeah, it's really the amount of objections or the objections that you'll get to brand bidding. They call it TM plus, trademark plus
Yeah.
bidding in general, are myriad. There's a number of reasons why brands are not very interested in you doing that. They generally come down to you're driving up the cost of my ads. It's not brand safe, so we don't want you as a third party to be, discussing us. We want to just have the control over how our brand is presented. Um, and then this idea of incrementality, which you mentioned, which is like we're going to get those anyway. So regardless if you drive up the cost, regardless of what you say, if it's safe, we have a feeling we're going to get those anyway. So we don't want to pay for you for them. That's kind of the broad-based ones. And I think that they're actually, I've been quite successful in convincing brands that there is a space between what all of those concerns, which are very valid and legit, and then, but there's a space, there's a very narrow space, but there's a space between that and what actually I, as a third party affiliate, can be more successful in promoting than they can be promoting it themselves. And so an example of that would be comparison content, right? Like this brand versus that brand. Will the average consumer be more persuaded by one of those brands screaming from the hilltop saying, "Yes, I am so good compared to my competitors. I
Yeah,
am
this
the
is really
best."
going to be an unbiased article that is coming from our domain, right?
Right, exactly. Like, we are the best. We know we're the best. The other people are horrible. Is that going to resonate with people? Or is it going to be more plausible, more authentic, more reasonable to hear from a third party saying, "Hey, we've done the research. We've compared all of the top options. And
Okay.
after all of that time, we actually think that option A is the best for this kind of person, and option B is the best for another kind of person." That seems more credible. It actually is more helpful to the user than it's biased, but it's less biased than the brand talking about it themselves. And
Okay.
so I think that's actually a really sound argument. I'm not just saying that because it was lucrative or that it's a good strategy. I think that's actually the case, and a lot of brands can be convinced to at least try it out. The other way I've sort of talked brands off the cliff is to say, you know what, you're worried about the price of ads increasing, you're worried about me bidding on your brand name or other key terms that you're bidding on, and you're worried about that inflating the costs because more advertisers are entering the auction. Well, why don't we just test it? Why don't we just run it for 3 weeks and see how much your ads go up, and how many conversions you get and how many conversions I get, and we'll just do a quick look and see, is this, did you get net more conversions for the same amount of cost? Like, what the cost per acquisition, is it the same as it was before?
Yeah.
And what's the total number of conversions? Like, we'll just run the test, and almost inevitably, I think in very, very few, with very few exceptions, the test came out in our favor to say that, yeah, this is a good activity to invest in and spend money on from the brand's perspective. So yeah, there's a couple ways to sort of not take an immediate no as the answer, and instead continue the conversation and see, test into it, or persuade the brand that this is a worthwhile use of their time and effort.
Yeah. One thing that is fascinating to me in the world of paid ads is a lot of these bigger companies will have pretty strict monthly budgets. Like, oh, maybe we're only allocated 100 grand a month for Google spend, and we blow through it by the 25th of the month. And so those last 5 or 6 days are like wide open for the affiliates. And it's like, if you were buying profitable traffic, what difference does it make if you spend 100 or 115? If your cost per acquisition was fine at 100, like, it just didn't make any sense. But it's like the bureaucracy of some of these bigger companies where, smaller publishers can be more nimble, more thoughtful, and especially at the end of the month, maybe the auctions become less competitive. You get cheaper clicks. Do you ever see anything like that happen?
Yeah, the bureaucracy can be both work for you and against you, right? There's many cases where you convince somebody internally that this is a great idea and they're really gung ho, but you can't get it approved by the brand safety team or the PR team, or somebody else, some other stakeholder who doesn't see this as a good use of funds.
Yeah.
So the bureaucracy can work against you. And in some cases, yeah, there are opportunities. There's some seasonality, is what I'd call it, where there can be a feasting opportunity, less advertisers in the auction,
Okay.
more activity on the conversion side, and, earnings go way up, as well as sort of winters where it's like, wow, everybody is advertising at a certain time of year, usually Black Friday, Cyber Monday, kind of end of the year is like the peak of advertising, at least in my health and wellness niche. And so in those cases, sometimes the cost of ads gets prohibitive, for arbitrage. It's too expensive, and there's no matter how much you're making on the back end, you're not going to be able to cover your costs. So
Yeah.
there are,
What's
yeah, there's highs and lows to this as well.
Yeah, talk to me about the math side of it, like the expected earnings minus the cost per click. Like, what's a typical cost per click? Like, what's a page view worth? Is there a target ROI? Obviously, the higher the better. Like, what are you looking at on the dollars and cents side of it?
Yeah, it really is niche specific. So in some cases, like we sort of talked about it in the very early stage, like maybe there's a niche where the traffic is so cheap, it's so uncompetitive that you could actually arbitrage through a display ad or something like that. That
Yeah.
may be possible. I don't know. In my particular case, essentially the formula you want to work on, or make work, is expected earnings per click, and that has to match the CPC, or it has to be higher than the cost per click, to your landing page.
Okay.
And slightly, there's one extra step in your calculation for each of those sides. So your expected earnings per click would be, whatever your click-through rate on the ad is times the click-through rate from your landing page to a partner times the conversion rate with that partner times the commission you get. So in a normal flow, you have to maybe subtract one of those conversion rates because the conversion is happening on your site. But if it's happening on a third-party site, you have to add in the click-through rate to the third-party site. That's an extra bit of math that a lot of people miss. But
Okay. Yeah. So if I have the top 10, hair loss products, maybe two-thirds of the people are going to click on option number one, and something like that, and say, okay, the expected earnings per click for that is $2.50 or something.
yeah, exactly. And so in my case, just to make the math a little bit more firm, our average CPC is actually quite high because we're in a health and wellness, your money, your life category with a ton of competition. And so, an average click is anywhere from say $3 to $6, right?
Oh
It's
my
the range
gosh.
can vary a lot, and so you better be pretty certain that for that visitor they're going to click through and at a high rate click through again, and then at a high rate convert, and that the
And
commission is
ultimately
there.
buy the thing. Wow.
Yeah, so it can work in really competitive arenas as well. You don't have to think about this as just being like, if there's competition, this is kaput.
Yeah.
Um,
That's fascinating. I mean, I was buying shoe clicks for like 25 cents. And so it's like, oh, $3 a click. Like, oh, I really got to have that landing page dialed in.
for sure, yeah, for sure. You want to make sure that you have high confidence before you spend your first dollar, and that your landing page is pretty dialed in. Luckily, there's lots of good examples to copy from. But one other thought I had is because you were kind of describing how you would do the math. What is your expected click through? What is your expected earning rates for this partner, and then this partner, and then this partner?
Yeah.
That is true. That's ultimately like the ultimate formula that you're trying to optimize for. But what I like to do to keep it really simple is to try and make the math work out just for that number one spot. So if you can break even with, or you can make the math work out such that you're breaking even just with that first partner, that position in who's in number one, that means anybody who clicks on position 2 through 5 or 2 through 10 and generates some commission is just profit. It's just gravy. So if the math working out, it's more conservative to model it out by a break-even point with just that first partner or that position one partner, and everything
Okay.
else is
Okay.
gravy. Yeah,
And then is there a target? Like, I'm going to trade $1 for $2 or trade $1 for $1.50. Like, where do you like to play? And like, okay, if I'm at this number, I'm really going to scale up that campaign to the extent that Google will take my money there, or there's search volume there, versus like, I kind of want to tweak some things and optimize it, because it becomes a cash flow challenge perhaps, because you got to pay Google now, or they're going to swipe your card now for the ads, and you're like, well, am I going to, I got paid from that affiliate for 30, 60,
months.
90 days, like depends
Yeah,
on their different payout terms.
yeah, it's a great question. So in the beginning, I just started as like, can I break even or can I make 10% profit? Like I don't really know what the profit margin is.
Yeah.
In our case, it started to it became evergreen at kind of 25-30%, and at different times of year you could get up to like almost 100%. So basically, like for every dollar you're putting in, you're getting $2 out, or
Oh, isn't that amazing?
like really really incredible. Yeah, and so at that point you're like, I want to step on the gas as much as possible, but there's a law of diminishing marginal returns, obviously. So the more money you spend in advertising, inevitably at some point the less efficient it gets. That incremental spend for the next dollar is not going to be as it's not going to go as far as like say the first dollar went.
Okay.
But it's hard to know where the ceiling is in cases where, in some cases, there's not a lot of search volume, and so you know exactly where the ceiling is. There's only so many queries. There are only so many lucrative queries, and you're going to cap out on those pretty quickly. But in the case of like, best hair loss product or something, I mean, there's like practically infinite number of queries, and so the question is, yeah, is there a certain profit margin where I maximize my profit? Or is there, but if there's, if the profit margin held firm, then I would want to spend as much as possible to maximize that overall profit, but knowing that the profit margin decreases as you spend. So there's kind of like this efficiency point,
Right, right. Yeah, you kind
supply
of picture that
demand,
curve. Yeah.
kind of curve, go back to like economics 101 in college or something. And yeah, for me, that there's maybe some math around that, but there's a lot of variables as well. The cost of ads, the products offered, and the brand awareness of each of those products, and the price points of each of those products, and those are all changing throughout the year, right? I mean, and so my point is like there's a lot of variables there. I
Yeah,
it's
I
hard to
mean,
know.
meanwhile, you're like my Chase Ink Preferred. One of these cards is like triple points on ad spend, up to a certain limit every year. It's like, oh, flying for free, baby. If I can spend money profitably, that's amazing.
Yeah, exactly. And so like going back to the cash flow discussion really fast. So typically, the affiliate terms are that you get paid out. 30 days would be, pretty typical, but often it'll extend into 60. The thing about a credit card is the card is charged today, but you're not expected to pay it for about 30 days. So in some ways, it depends if without paying a fee or without paying interest, right? And so those things kind of line up. It is true that you need a little bit of working capital
Yeah,
to like start this process, right? You have to be able to risk or wager a few $1,000s in the beginning. You might lose it all, right? It's sort of like gambling. But if you can figure it out, if you're willing to iterate a bit, and then you figure something out, the gold at the end of the rainbow is like, wow, this thing is scalable and it's evergreen, and for every dollar I put in, I get $1.50 or $2 back.
yeah,
And I'm not relying on an organic algorithm. So
yeah.
that
You're
is
just
the
breathing a little easier every time there's an algorithm update. You're not freaking out, hitting refresh on the reports. Like, did I get hammered on this one? Yeah.
Yeah, so there is a cash flow crunch or like a cash flow thing to manage here, but it's not as challenging as e-commerce, for instance, where you have to sort of front load all of your inventory spend and hope that somebody buys it over the next 12 months.
Sure. Yeah, there are more capital intensive businesses to be sure. One thing that you mentioned was going a little bit higher in the funnel, especially for the brands that are somewhat restricted on trademark bidding, and it could be best hair loss products or even just hair loss or erectile dysfunction, like somebody just kind of in their beginning research phases where like they may or may not be ready to buy, and it's I gotta hope that the cost per clicks are lower for that kind of stuff because I imagine the conversion rates would be lower too.
Yeah,
Is it even worthwhile to play in that space because it's like very early research phase?
yeah. I mean, it just depends on kind of how things are cookied and how people are shopping for a particular product in a particular niche. I won't say it's impossible, or it'll never work the higher up the funnel you go, but I do think that you want to start as low in the funnel as possible, and you want to understand like these keywords have already been working for me, right,
Yeah,
from an organic perspective. So that's where you start. You don't start like, let me go really high up and then middle and then bottom and see what works. No, no, start with what you know works and then expand from there, and that will de-risk your ad spend outlay.
yeah. Because for me, it was shoes would have been horribly unprofitable. Women's shoes would have been horribly unprofitable. Women's running shoes, best women's running shoes, all the way down to like, New Balance model, XYZ. Like it would have to be super, super specific for it to work. And just that makes a lot of sense. Like start at the bottom of the funnel, start with what you know is going to convert, high buyer intent type of stuff, and then see if you can crawl your way up. And to the point about affiliate cookies, like is it going to be a 3-month cookie if somebody clicks on your link and ultimately converts? Like, okay, that's cool, you're still going to get credit for that, but again, you got to pay for that click up front. It may be a while before you see the eventual conversion down the road. The other thing I want to ask about is Google is one ads platform, high search intent, target the exact keywords that you're looking for. You play around with Facebook ads at all for this, for Fin versus Fin as well?
Yeah, just a little bit. So, it's harder to make work on Facebook for a couple reasons. One is the creative. It's actually easy now to create, visual creatives with generative AI and Canva and all these tools, right? But historically, it's been more challenging, at least for someone like me who's not a a designer, or very design inclined. So it's like, a text ad in Google is easier to manage than a Facebook ad basically,
Okay.
or ad campaign. So that's why I always skewed there. And also, there's generally higher intent on Google or search platforms. Somebody is actively typing something in the bar to actively find an answer or a product. On
Right.
Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, they are going there to be entertained and to zone out and avoid procrastinate a bit. And so, they can be convinced to take action. Don't get me wrong. People make huge brands and lots of sales on these social platforms, but it's lower intent. There's no question. And so, yeah, I would say start with search. That's pretty smart. And then we did end up moving over to the meta properties and dabbling a bit there. The motion that we really saw a lot of success with is called social whitelisting. So for anyone who's not familiar, the idea is that you're able to give your brand partners access to advertise using your handles, so your Facebook page or your Instagram account, and serve ads that look like they're coming from you,
Okay.
but they're actually managed, and the ad spend and the targeting and the creative is all managed by the brand, the advertiser itself. And
Dang.
so, yeah,
That's
go ahead.
that. Oh, like that sounds amazing. If somebody else is going to run ads through your affiliate link, like where's the lose in that? Or where could he go wrong?
Exactly. Yeah. And a lot of people, if you're on social media, you've likely seen these ads, and they can come from big influencers, but they can also come from small publishers like Fin versus Fin. And, it's a similar concept to what we were talking about before in the paid search space, where in a versus query, for instance, someone is actually the user will find it more credible to read an answer from a credible third party than they will from the brand itself. And so it's leveraging this third party-ness, I should say, and that's the same motion just on Facebook. But the difference is that you don't have to run the ads for the brand. The brand can run their own ads because they're doing that anyway. Every single brand out there is running Facebook or Meta ads,
Yeah.
and so they can just sort of you give them access, and then they select a new handle to run the ads from. Instead of running the ads from their own handle, they're running it from your affiliate handle. And yeah, it's all paid traffic going to your site, and so it's diversifying your overall traffic source mix as well as your revenue mix, and it's very hands off. So
How do I sign up for this? Like, what's the conversation look like with brand XYZ to say, uh, have I got a deal for you? You're going to run paid ads through my affiliate channel, and the users are going to find it more credible. Like, how do I even start broach that subject? It sounds awesome.
it sounds crazy, right? Like it sounds like I just made it up, but actually this has been going on. Again, I wasn't the first person to pioneer this.
Yeah,
I just noticed it happening, and then I started to ask the brands if they're interested in it. And you'd be
sure.
shocked. I mean, depending on how fast that brand is looking to grow, depending on how much they're spending on Meta today, which probably is a lot, you'd be
Okay.
surprised. They
So
are
maybe
kind
that's a
of
starting point.
starting.
Look for the brands that are already spending money to the extent that you could see them in your feed, or you could see what there's probably estimator tools to see what they're spending or what their ads look like.
Yeah, you can use the Facebook ad library. It's a free tool. You can kind of you just Google it, Facebook ad library. You type in the geography that you're interested in and the brand that you're interested in, and it will show you all the ads that they're running currently and for the last few months. And
Okay.
so you can see both like, okay, are they running it from their own account? Are they running it from third-party handles? You can also just see, are they really active on Facebook or Meta in general? And I think it's fair to assume that if a brand is big, if a brand is growing, they are very active on Meta. I mean, it is like it's basically table stakes at this point for any growth team.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think it's fair to say like, hey, you're already running Meta ads. Have you tried social whitelisting? Depending on their experience, they may be very well versed in it. They may not understand it. You explain to them how it works, and again, you sort of position it as a test. Well, we
And
don't
this would
know that
be
it
reaching
works.
out to like starting with your affiliate manager.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Whomever is your point of contact at the brand.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's one other just kind of to go back to the Google side of things that I wanted to mention. There's another way, another part of just because we're talking about how to persuade partners and brands to get on board with this, and how to sort of de-risk your initial spend. One of the interesting things that I found, especially with high growth partners, so brands that are really looking to grow fast and willing to experiment, and that's a lot of brands these days. It's not like a unique, fairly unique thing. Is that you can say, hey, I would like to find this win-win situation where I'm going to drive you a bunch of conversions on Google or Facebook. But in order to potentially find this evergreen fountain of revenue and traffic and conversions, I need to test with some ad spend. And so would you be willing to, I don't know, spend $2,000-3,000 on ads to fund this experiment and see if it works? And $2,000 or $3,000 sounds like a lot to an individual side hustler or to somebody running a small business, but to a brand, $2,000 or $3,000 is what they paid some small influencer to create a post one time. It's like a rounding error in many cases,
Okay.
and
So,
so
so to pause, that would be if you were starting out your own ad campaign, but kind of reaching out like, look, you know, I want to find this long-term evergreen campaign, but it's going to take a little bit of budget. Would you help me with the startup costs? Would you help me ramp this up? Was I hearing that correctly?
yeah, yeah. So it kind of you can think about it for both platforms. So in the case of Google, you as the affiliate will have to outlay the cash first. And so in order to de-risk it further, you can ask the brand, hey, would you be willing to sort of reimburse me for that ad spend?
Okay.
And then we'll learn together, basically. But the prize at the end of the rainbow, as I mentioned, is like, we find this evergreen, scalable, um, mutually beneficial channel. But on the Facebook side, it's similar. You can, if there's any pushback to that for social whitelisting, you can just say, well, how about you just start with a very small spend on your end, just to test it, just to see if it works. Like, don't
Yeah.
go crazy. We're not asking you to get married. We're asking for the first date. Um, you know, let's just see if this works. I mean, I think it works for a lot of your competitors. Here are a bunch of screenshots of your competitors running similar campaigns for months and months and months. Do you think that they're running them unprofitably for a bunch of months?
Yeah.
I
Gosh, I
doubt
know
it.
now, like, I'm going to be paying much closer attention to the ads that I see and be like, oh, was this a social whitelist ad? I had no idea this was a thing. This is fascinating.
It's yeah. Once you know about it, you just don't stop seeing it. It's everywhere. Um, and there's disclosures as well. Like you should say that it's a partnership, and you should say that it's you want to be upfront with people on the ad itself. But there's a lot of blindness to that out on social media as well. So that doesn't necessarily impact the conversion rates. On the social whitelisting side, it's really one of the surprising things I learned is just how nasty the comments are on Facebook or any social platform for that matter. So you run these ads, right? And they're like, or you give a brand to run, you give a brand permission to run ads using your social handle, and they start running these ads. And if you don't have somebody on their side managing the comments, then it doesn't matter what the ad is. It can be the most innocuous thing ever, but people will get vicious in the comments, just absolutely vicious. And so if you don't have somebody, internally either on your side or usually it's on the brand side, managing those comments and responding to the angry people and boosting the happy people, you will get this, just polarized, like, wow, that thing is so fake and it's never going to work for anyone. And oh my gosh, this like helped me become the best version of myself kind of dichotomy. It's actually pretty hilarious.
Interesting. Now, this was years ago, but I heard, rather than delete the hater comments, rather than delete the negative comments, kind of engage, like send that engagement signal back to Facebook that, oh man, people are really into this ad. Maybe they were not reading sentiment at that point. I don't know where you're at on that.
For the most part, if it's not being managed, so if I see a brand doing nothing, then I'll ping them and be like, hey, we need to figure something out. Like this can't go unattended.
Yeah.
But I think the best strategy is kind of what you're saying. Yeah, you want to respond and show that you're helpful. Be like, oh, I really respect that opinion, but also respectfully disagree. Kind of like just a small pushback, but for the most part, you're saying I respect. You're not like looking to brawl on a Facebook comment. You're just looking to
Yeah.
acknowledge that you're there and that person has been heard, basically.
All right. Yeah, I love reading the comments on different ads because it is exactly how you describe. Some people say, hey, this changed my life. And other people like, this is 100% a scam. You're like, well, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So this is an interesting phenomenon there. One of the common pitfalls I would say for social whitelisting, but overall, just to summarize, social whitelisting is an extremely easy thing to turn on. It's a few clicks. It's persuading a partner to that they want to try it, and then it is just a few clicks, and then the ball is in your partner's court to drive paid traffic to your site. It's amazing.
Okay.
On the paid search side, there's quite a bit of setup. There's a lot of nuance to, both getting it off the ground as well as getting it to scale up and then getting it to stay consistently profitable. So it's harder, but I would also say, in my mind, it's easier than building a large email list in many cases. So it just depends
Sure.
kind of what you're good at, what your orientation is, um, where you want to spend your time and potentially, risk your dollars as well.
Yeah. The analytical brain side of me really likes it from the standpoint of, shortcutting the path to traffic to, okay, if I put $1 in, can I get $1.50 out? Like, and then, tweaking and optimizing, all aspects of the campaign and the landing page. Like, that sounds really fun. And then kind of the negotiation side of it, like trying to develop these win-win partnerships. I think it makes a lot of sense. Any other common mistakes or pitfalls or even expensive mistakes that you ended up making along the way?
I tried to de-risk things as much as possible, so I don't have any stories of just like, wow, I turned this thing on and I jacked up the spend and I stopped watching it, and then 10 days later I lost my shirt. So luckily I don't have any experiences of that. Um, I've definitely had partners be upset about the keywords that we're bidding on, and basically told us to change our course, either to stop or to in most cases they just say, hey, like please stop bidding on this keyword.
Okay.
And in some cases they would say, we agreed, these are in our terms of service, and it'll be very kind of threatening
Mm.
language there. But in every case, I've been able to say, I'm really sorry, like ask for forgiveness. It's immediately paused. Let's figure out like a path forward that
Yeah.
works
In a
for
lot of
both.
cases, it can be unintentional because like, Google to their credit is trying to like, broad match your search terms in a lot of cases. And unless you specifically add that brand term as a negative keyword, you might still show up even if you weren't intentionally trying to bid on it.
Totally true. Yeah, exactly. They're constantly broadening your match types.
Yeah.
Depending on how much control you give them, they will, like we said before, eat away all the margin and spend all your dollars unprofitably. So, yeah, that's definitely true. I'm curious, just going back to your dabbling in this category, it was your first side hustle or one of your early hustles. Why did you stop, or what killed that business for you? It sounded like you had some success early on, and maybe you found bigger and better things to do. Just kind of curious.
Yeah, it was over the course of 9 years. The margin in between that cost of traffic and what that traffic was worth in terms of the affiliate conversion, like that margin got narrower and narrower and narrower, and it became kind of a challenging place to play. And it was a mistake of mine in not learning SEO earlier, or not reinvesting some of those earlier profits into diversifying traffic sources. Like you said, I want to be less, I want to de-risk this as much as I can, but I was still very much reliant on that one traffic source, and it became less profitable over time.
Yeah, it makes sense. So you had the reverse course, right? You're like, I want to de-risk away from paid media, and I was like, I want to diversify into paid media.
Yeah.
Um, so it depends where you start. That makes sense.
Oh, good. Well, that's a place to transition to paidmediaaffiliates.com. You got the big payday from selling the site, but you say, hey, the work is not over yet. Now you're helping other people get started and grow with this strategy, paidmediaaffiliates.com. What else has got you excited these days, or what's going on over there?
Yeah, basically, as I figure out my next project to work on, I thought, hey, this is actually really unique time for this skill set, given what's going on in the SEO world and how challenging it's been lately. And the more I talk to people like me, both individual site owners or just affiliates in general, at every level, both people who are just starting as well as people who have been in the game for decades. Even you and I were talking about this, how SEO is just it's a challenging time for people trying to build SEO traffic at the moment. Um, I just think that this is an interesting category because it works. It's just as evergreen. I have lived that experience, but it seems to be like very few people are thinking about arbitraging paid media and figuring out how to diversify their business with this channel. And so I thought, yeah, it just would be interesting to create an online course around it, and help other people potentially see the light on other avenues to take their business that are maybe a little bit less obvious than, grow your newsletter or build a social following. So that was the impetus there. And yeah, so I'm still, the course is launching soon. It's on paidmediaaffiliates.com. And if you're interested in learning more about this, even just chatting to me about if this could work for your niche, feel free to sign up there, and we'll be in touch.
Very good. We'll link that up, paidmediaaffiliates.com. You can check Alex out over there. Let's wrap this thing up with your number one tip for Side Hustle Nation 2024 edition.
De-risk as much as possible. So whether you have something that's working well, don't think that will work well forever. And whether you're thinking about starting something from scratch, I think just think about, how do I de-risk that first step as much as possible? So my tips for getting brand partners on board before you launch, before you spend your first dollar, getting them to even maybe fund the spend, is, it's sort of a specific piece of advice. But the general piece of advice is de-risk, and think about how to, kind of stack the deck in your favor before you spend a lot of time or money.
Yeah, it's so true. It's kind of one of the common threads of the show. Keep your risks low, keep your goals high, and get after it. 2019 tip we had was be extremely persistent, something I think that has obviously paid off. And then we had a little Where Are They Now episode in 2020. We talked about figuring out the first model, and then the challenge becomes thinking outside the box, which I think is a great illustration of what we've been talking about today. Hey, we found something that worked. We found content that converted. How do we get more eyeballs to it, even if we have to pay for those? How do we, and do that in a de-risked way? So again, appreciate you joining me. Some of the notes that I wrote down, some of the sound bites that I wrote down. Don't be a flamingo standing on one leg. It's fragile, right? You don't want to get blown over by the wind. See if you can, diversify your business that way. And we talked about, in the wake of Google updates, building a larger brand, and maybe that's through social media, maybe that's through an email list, maybe that's through video, maybe it's through paid traffic in this case. I like the call to copy what's working. Look, if there are big publishers in your space, if there are small publishers in your space who are spending money on ads, if they've been doing it for any length of time, they're probably not losing money, right? So copy what's working. You can do that on Google. You can do that on Facebook. What does their landing page look like? What does their ad copy look like? Copy what's working. In a lot of cases, you probably don't have to reinvent the wheel. And then takeaway number 3 is a lot of it depends on finding the right partners, where the math is going to work out from an affiliate standpoint, where they're investing in growth, where they, maybe they have raised some money and they're spending money to acquire customers. Like, hey, how can you get some of that flowing to you to help them achieve their goals through social whitelisting, through having them front load the experiment? Maybe even it's just paying you extra affiliate commission. Hey, if I can drive more volume, would you increase my rates? Lots of different levers you might be able to pull on finding the right partners there. But this is Alex's 3rd appearance on the show. If you want to get more of the backstory, I encourage you to check out the previous 2 episodes. His co-founder Healy was on those as well. Those are episodes 367 and 410 in your podcast feed. 367 and 410. Go find those. Give them a listen. If you're new to the show, or if you've been listening for a long time, doesn't matter. You can go build yourself a personalized playlist of the most relevant episodes for you. All you got to do is go to hustle.show, answer a few short multiple choice questions, and the little quiz is going to spit out this cool curated playlist recommendation based on the answers that you gave. Again, hustle.show for that. Big thanks to Alex for sharing his insight once again. Thanks to our sponsors for helping make this content free for everyone. You can hit up sidehustlenation.com/deals for all the latest offers from our sponsors in one place. And thanks for supporting the advertisers that support the show. It really does make a difference. That is it for me. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're finding value in the show, the greatest compliment is to share it with a friend. So fire off that text message. Hey, I think you got to check this out. Until next time, let's go out there and make something happen. And I'll catch you in the next edition of the Side Hustle Show. Hustle on.